Welcome to another fun-filled Friday edition of Second City Sports. We're live and in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago, along with Miss Lakina McGee, which is she. I am Cindy Brown. Hey, that's me. You can follow yours surely on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You follow me, Lakina McGee, on the Twitter and Lakina McGee on the IG.
Make sure you download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. You want to know why? Because we said so, that's why. And also, so you can catch all the live shows that we have airing throughout the week and the weekend. So if you happen to miss them, you can go back and listen to them and watch them at your own leisure. Please download that Sports Zone Chicago app today. Speaking of Sports Zone Chicago, please follow us on all social media platforms, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Once again, please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms. If you want to download our podcast, and we know you've been doing that, please continue to do that. You can find our podcast at War on Anchor. We are available on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. Make sure you type this in those search engine boxes on those podcast platforms. You ready? WARR on Anchor. Once again, at War on Anchor. Please give us a 5-star rating. Give us your review. Give us your 5 stars on those Apple and iTunes podcast platforms. Give us some good ratings. We need it and we deserve it. And also, while you're at it, just go to War Media at WARR Media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Once again, that's at War Media on all social media platforms. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
We're unapologetically fun, and we have very definite opinions. If you have any definite opinions during our 2-hour extravaganza, we call it Sports Talk Radio Show, you can always hit us up in the comment section at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in your questions or comments in the comments section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you. But if you decide to troll and or do something stupid, I've given Lakina full power to give you full severely and be a boot.
Bye-bye.
I love when she says that. But before we begin, we must remind you, you can also catch Sports Zone Chicago right now on Roku TV. That's right. So celebrate with the squad and get with the program. Sports Zone Chicago is now on Roku TV. If you already have a Roku television, just tap on that sports folder and download Sports Zone Chicago through that avenue. If you don't have a Roku TV, you have a bunch of handheld devices laying around: iPhone, iPad, iTouch, your Chromebook like I'm using right now, your personal PC like Lakina's using right now. Just head over to the Google Play Store and download that Roku TV app and access Sports Zone Chicago through that avenue. So no more excuses. Celebrate with the squad and get with the program. Sports Zone Chicago is available 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. I know I fumbled that up, but you get the point.
Anywhere, anytime you want. It's all right there for you. And I know it's about to snow here in a little bit. So, nice snowy day. You want to, curl up and, watch and listen to us. So no problem. Now we're going to have Jack Bushman from On Blackhawks to talk Blackhawks. A pretty busy week for the Blackhawks, of course. Patrick Kane and Matt Stillman, were traded. We'll talk to him about that and some of the other happenings in the NHL. Some big trades happening yesterday with the trade deadline coming up in about a couple of hours here. But first, we're going to talk some Bulls. As usual, a mixed bag for the Bulls. I mean, they lose a tough one to Toronto. But then they come back a couple of days later and almost blew another one to Detroit, but they were able to hang on. And you can kind of tell that, I don't know, I guess you could say that maybe Pat Bev is actually becoming a pretty big difference maker for this team. We all saw that little clip early on in that Pistons game where I guess Vooch went over his open man, and I guess Pat Bev was trying to tell him, hey, look, you missed your guy, and Vooch and such. DeRozan tried to kind of play peacemaker and such, but like I said, this is why you want Pat Bev on your team. You have to hold these guys accountable to stick a fire up their rears. They're still right there in the right there in the cusp of that 10 spot. They're actually not that far away from the 8 spot either. They're about 2.5 back from Atlanta for the 8 spot. So so what do you think about the Bulls this week?
As you mentioned, it was a mixed bag. I'll go with the positive first. They played great for 3.5 quarters in Detroit the other night on Wednesday. I know their biggest lead was 21. We talked about all year, Lakina, that Nikolai Vucevic needed the ball in the post. We needed him to operate in the paint. He was doing that on Wednesday. But something else that I noticed, too, that not too many people were talking about all year, and we haven't talked about it enough on this show. I'll just start with ourselves. Zach LaVine, did you notice something on Wednesday that he hasn't been doing lately? He's been driving the ball to the basket, making other players better, and he got into the passing lane a few times. I said, I like that Zach LaVine. I don't like the Zach LaVine that's trying to be like Damian Lillard of Portland, throwing up the 30-foot jumpers. I get it when you hit a couple, you feeling it, you stick to that. But I like this Zach LaVine. He's driving the ball to the basket. He's making other players better, and he's getting after it defensively. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the NBA Defensive Player of the Year by no stretch, but I like when Zach is active, not just settling for that long jump shot. I want to see that Zach LaVine from here on out.
Yeah, I think, having Pat Bev there, showing that, okay, yeah, he doesn't have to be, the guy that takes the shots all the time. He can kind of be the guy that kind of, facilitates some of that offense and using some of that, that little maneuvers and whatnot. So I think I like the fact that, Zach's been doing that lately. Hope we can keep it up. That's gonna be kind of like the key here. And, for me, as far as the Bulls are concerned, I mean, look, it is what it is. I mean, they're the weird thing about it is that, like I said, I mean, they play Phoenix tonight, and they get their first case of Kevin Durant. We'll get to his debut probably not till after the break, but you're kind of sort of like right there, and they're a little bit of a tough part of the scheduling. I think, like I said, I think these are most of the exception maybe a couple. Most of the East teams are struggling, so it's I know this might shock some Bulls fans, but they're still right there in the cusp of getting to that 10 spot. So I think for me, look, I think I'm just gonna just take it as it goes, and look, it's sort of one of those things where I know people are saying at this point that maybe they should, tank and stuff like that. That's not going to happen. A lot of these guys are too competitive. Plus, they're not bad enough to tank. So you might as well just, to see if they can kind of make some noise, get into that, that 10 spot in that play and maybe make some noise from there.
Yeah, just wrap up on Pat Bev and the Bulls. As we said on the last couple of shows, Patrick Beverley brings in intangibles that you don't necessarily see on the stat sheet, as you mentioned, with the leadership and what he did to Vucevic in the middle of that fourth quarter the other night in Detroit. He brings out the hustle. He brings out the defense. And you saw that as well in that win over Detroit. And also, too, can we give some credit? And I think we've been saying this at least for the last month and a half or so. Can we give some credit to Kobe White? He's been on a hot streak scoring-wise. On Wednesday, he had 14 points. And Patrick Williams, who's been kicked out of the starting lineup ever since the addition of Patrick Beverley, he's been playing a little bit better. I know he chipped in with 11 points off the bench, but it looks like he's starting to round into form as well. And DeMar DeRozan, like I said, this version of Zach LaVine that I saw on Wednesday is going to help this Bulls team if he's consistent. The DeMar DeRozan version that I saw the other night, I like that version because whatever Zach does, if he plays his all-around game, that makes DeMar DeRozan that much better. You don't have to expect DeMar to carry the team, hoping he can score 35-plus points to bail you out. This Bulls team needs to play consistent for 48 minutes, and Zach LaVine needs to play an all-around game. I like what Alex Caruso is doing. Patrick Beverley, we talked about him enough. He's here for the mainstay. That's why the Bulls are not going to tank. If Zach LaVine can be consistent all around every night, this Bulls team is going to be okay. I'm not saying they're going to win the championship. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're even going to steal a playoff series. But the way where they are right now, if they can keep this up, I'm not going to say the sky's the limit, but they should at least make the play-in.
Yeah, I'll say they're like I said, they're only a game and a half back of the Wizards. They're only like 2.5 back of the Atlanta. We'll get to them in a second. They have a new coach. It's gonna be interesting. Like I said before, I know all the tanking folks are like, oh, let's tank. Like, no, they're not gonna do that. You guys are too competitive, and the East isn't very good for the most part, with such maybe a few teams. So everyone's pretty much even. So it's all really gonna depend on if they can make that move. We'll see. They got a big test tonight against KD. CP3, Devin Booker, and the gang from Phoenix. So should be a fun one tonight. You listen to Second City Sports on Sports on Chicago. Lakina McGee, Cindy Brown with you, as we usually do here, as we talked about the week that is or was, I should say, in the NBA. Let's go backwards. Let's start from yesterday's games and a couple of interesting results. We'll start with the Sixers and the Mavs, and the Mavs were up big. Sixers came back. Then, they got into a little bit of a run. Talk about the Mavs, and they were able to pull away. Luka had 42, but you kind of tell there might be some things are starting to kind of bubble up a little bit. As I warned, Sid.
You don't say.
I've warned Sid and a few others that something might start to kind of boil over a little bit. But look, they did just enough to win that game. I'm talking about the Mavs. Kyrie also had 40, so it's But other than that, I mean, most of the guys. I mean, I know Reggie Bullock had 15 team, but other than that, I mean, there really wasn't a lot of scoring. Outside of Kyrie and Luca. And for me, I think they're also they pulled away late from the Sixers, and they're actually the first pair of Mavs to actually score 40 points in the same game, which is kind of shocking considering their rich history. But this is the first time that's happened. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those days where yes, the 3 pointers. They look, the 3 pointers I think were hitting it for them. That's what really helped them. They were 13 for 21 for 3 point range combined. So but yeah, what do you think about this game? I saw a little bit of this game. I thought, okay, yeah, something's amiss here. They were able to pull this off against the Sixers, but could be interesting they can do it the rest of the way.
Well, James Harden had a good first quarter. I know he had 27 points overall, but he had a good first quarter. Joel and Embiid got the ball early, but they went away from him, especially after Dallas pulled away late in that third quarter to build their lead to over 25 points. But it was an all-around game for Philadelphia. Tobias Harris had 10 points. I wish he could have scored a little bit more, but he was active. Tyrese Maxey had a great game. His parents were there. He had 29 points. And off the bench, you had Shake Milton. He had 12 points. But Lakina, you said about Kyrie Irving and his almost shenanigans. Like I said, he was going to be on his best behavior. Let's be honest here. Dallas was still stewing over their loss against the Lakers last Sunday afternoon at home. That's what happened. And I'll say this again for Dallas. Besides Luka and Kyrie, who's going to be your third scorer? Tim Hardaway Jr., where are you? Some of the other guys, where are you?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the key here. And like as far as the match actually performed, look, Tyrese is like actually from right just outside Dallas, so that's why of course his parents were there, and I think some other family members were there as well. Of course he went to Kentucky, but yeah, so he pulled a nice showing, but yeah, not too much. I mean, look, like I said, they went away from B and B. That's why the Mavs were able to kind of get into gear and they were able to pull away late. But for me, I think this game is really kind of like, yeah, okay. We'll see. I know you want to say that. Oh, they had 3 games. They had 3 days to get over it. So I don't. They're still stewing over that loss to the Lakers. Okay, whatever. But speaking of, staying with it before we go to break. The Clippers have lost now 4 in a row. They lose to the Warriors 115-91. Of Jordan Peele had 34 points leading the way for the Warriors. And Klay Thompson, again, he had a great shooting week. We'll get to his other big week in a second. He only had 19 points. I'm like, oh Lord, what a bad game for him. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, but look, I mean, Jonathan Kuminga had 19 off the bench. So yeah, so a nice little balance scoring, and such. Of course, Steph is still out, but the Clippers they're concerning to me because they've lost a couple of really tough games. In this case, it kind of, they were up early. They were right there and they actually were up at halftime. But, 42-16, they were outscored in the third quarter. That's not going to work. So, look, Westbrook's actually, didn't have his best game for his first time as a Clipper. He only had 8 points. But, Kawhi only had 21. PG only had 11. They're struggling from the field. The 3-point rate, they were only 9 for 43 from 3. Something's going on here in the Clippers, and I'm not liking what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, as we mentioned on our last show, it all starts with Paul George. He did not have a great game, only 3 of 15 shooting. That's not going to get it done. You really didn't get much from your bench. Nicholas Batum, where are you? Norman Powell, he was missing in action last night. He only scored 2 points. You need contribution from your bench. And Robert Covington from Chicago, he only had 3 points. You need some consistent scoring from your bench, but it all starts with Paul George, and he's lost in these last 3 games. I blame him more than I blame Russell Westbrook. I don't, like you said, Russ didn't have a great game last night, but Russ has been actually playing well. I know it's exactly 1 week ago today that he made his Clippers debut, but you cannot blame Russ for why the Clippers are losing. It starts with Paul George, and it trickles down to the rest of the guys. And also, too, they're not playing team defense. Like you said, that second half, they didn't even score in the 20s in the second half in the third or fourth quarters. And that's not going to get it done.
Yeah, that's just brutal. And especially, I don't really trust them, in this series. I know, a couple of us in our preview show had them going to the finals. looking pretty bad right now, but whatever. But we're gonna take a really quick break. Of course, we'll talk some more hoops as more NBA stuff, including some big injuries, among some big stars, some key teams, trying to go for a playoff berth. And it's now March, so guys know what that means. College hoops, we got March Madness. About to start as conference tournaments commences in some parts. Even some local teams hoping to vie for some of those spots. Illinois gets a big win last night. Northwestern. They need to kind of share up their resume as well. So more hoops talk coming up next. Lakina McGee, Cindy Brown, Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too. These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver.
I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you. Your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Oh, sorry. Welcome back to Second City Sports on a hashtag Friday Fun Friday edition. We're live and live in color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid Deslakina. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, at SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow me at Keenan McGee on the Twitter and at Keenan Square McGee on the IG.
We have less than 85 minutes left of this extravaganza we call a Sports Talk Radio Show. If you want to hit us up in the comments section, you can do so at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in your questions or comments in the comments section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you. Let's continue our NBA talk, Lakina, by reviewing some of the key games from this past Wednesday night's action. We'll start off with the Phoenix Suns as Kevin Durant dropped 25 points in his Phoenix Suns debut as the Suns defeated the Charlotte Hornets on the road as part of Phoenix's East Coast road trip, 105-91.
Yeah, nice.
Actually, it was
Showing by
23.
23 points. Yeah, I would say
Durant.
23 points. Yeah, 23 points and like 6 boards and such. But yeah, I mean, look, you can tell he hasn't played over almost 2 months. So of course, it's going to take him a couple of games to kind of get things going. Like I said, we'll see him against the Bulls tonight. But yeah, I mean, look, I know it's Charlotte's and such, but let's see. I know some people say, well, let's see how he does in some of the big teams. But look, if you're Durant and if you're the Suns, you'll take it. I mean, look, Charlotte has been sort of one of those teams where you're kind of in that sort of like in that realm there, but a nice showing by Katie, and I think look, it's sort of one of those things where I mean, look, you'll like I said, you'll take the win if you're Phoenix, and just like you said, I mean, it's sort of one of those things where you want to you just want to kind of like, okay, get the first game out the way, and I'm sure he'll get better and better as it goes on.
Another primetime game that took place on Wednesday was the Boston Celtics versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Boston Celtics get the best of the Cleveland Cavaliers in TD Bank North Garden on Wednesday. 117-113 was your final. Donovan Mitchell went off for 44 points for Cleveland, while Jason Tatum, your MVP candidate, he had 41. Lakina, the Celtics may be the best team in the East. Cleveland's not that far behind, but as we said all year, Cleveland is a good team, but they need to learn how to execute down the stretch. You can tell by the teams that are contenders and the teams that are pretenders. Boston is a contender right now, especially what they went through last year, and it looks like they're a better team this year. They know how to execute down the stretch. Cleveland's still learning how to do that.
Yeah, that's 34th 30 plus point game for Tatum. I think that's the most, and I think that's the most of he had 33 points in addition to Jaylen Brown's 41. So definitely a nice good team win for Boston. Like you said, I mean Cleveland's just learning how to do all that. So that was a tough loss for them. Now Philadelphia, before that loss to Dallas, they beat Miami 119-96. Tyrese Maxey had 27 points, a game high, leading the way for them. And it was definitely one of those games where it was, sort of, I know Embiid didn't play, and I think, and Harden had 23 points. So they kind of had to it was sort of a rest game, I guess, for Embiid. So they were able to, Maxey was able to kind of pick up the slack for him. So I think that was a nice win for them. I guess a Miami squad that kind of has been struggling a little bit as of late.
Yeah, the Miami Heat we talked about all year, looking where are you going to get that scoring from outside of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Tyler Herro's been up and down. Duncan Robinson, he's been MIA. Kyle Lowry has been on the injury list his last 2 years in the Miami Heat uniform. So we're going to get those contributions from besides Adebayo and Jimmy Butler offensively. It seems like to me the Miami Heat are to shell themselves from what they were last year and definitely what they were 2 years ago, a couple years ago when they reached the NBA Finals in the bubble.
Yeah, they'll definitely. We'll see what happens with them. Now, Milwaukee, they've won 16 in a row. They've averaged about 123 points this time. This case, they beat Houston 113-99. Desmond Bay had 30 points, and 130, I should say, 117 over Orlando, I should say. That they've averaged about 123 points during that 16-game winning streak. I'm talking about the Bucks. So they're starting to kind of get together. Giannis had 31 points. In that, I know it's Orlando, but still, I mean, 16 in a row for them. But if you're a Bucks fan, you're wondering, like, okay, are they peaking too soon? Because 16 in a row is nothing to sneeze at, but at the same time, you want to kind of save it for something for the playoffs.
Yeah, Milwaukee, you don't have too many complaints right now. Giannis is all about getting him back healthy. Hopefully, Chris Middleton is ready for the stretch run come playoff time. It's all about health for the Bucks at this point. And some of the guys that are getting an extra playing time right now who normally don't get playing time, this is their chance to shine, and they'll be that much more ready come playoff time.
Now, Lakers beat OKC 123-117 to kind of get their revenge when LeBron broke the scoring record against them. They beat them. Dennis Schroeder had 26 points, and unfortunately, LeBron's going to be out because of his foot injury. Now, AD and Anthony Davis is going to be out for a little bit, so you're going to need guys to kind of pick us, guys like Schroeder, guys like Mo Bamba, and
Mhm.
Malik Beasley and those guys to kind of just pick up the slack. They actually have a different, sort of a good supporting cast. Can they keep it up and try to get into that 10th spot? That's going to be worth seeing.
And don't forget, the Lakers need a healthy D'Angelo Russell as well. So all parts are needed to be healthy and on alert without LeBron, as you mentioned. But it all starts and ends with Anthony Davis, and he's been playing very well. We talked about him on our last show, what he did in that comeback at Dallas last Sunday afternoon. So Anthony Davis can stay healthy and bring that intensity. I think the Lakers can't survive this until LeBron James gets back. It won't be surprising to me, Lakina, in a couple of weeks, LeBron James decides to come back if the Lakers are still in it. Will it surprise you? It wouldn't for me.
No, not when I mean, like I said, this is gonna be the first time he's gonna be out for a little bit. So they didn't really say how long he's gonna be. So, but he actually finished the game. Even though he said he heard a pop in that foot. So you wonder, like, okay, are they kind of just sort of take this time because he is of advanced age now? I'm talking about LeBron, a lot of wear and tear. So you wonder, like, are they going to just be more cautious about it? So we'll see what happens. The Pelicans beat the Blazers 121-110. Dame had 41, but Brandon Ingram had 40 for the Pelicans. So the scoring there hasn't really been an issue for the Blazers. Of course, going into Tuesday's games, they again lose to this time to Golden State 123-105. Of course, Dame had 25. Jordan Poole had 29. But the fact that the Blazers, the scoring wise, I mean, Dave can't do it all by himself, though.
No, he can't. Where's Anthony Simons? Where's Jeremy Grant? Can we get some help for Dame Dolly here? And we've been talking about this off and on all season, Lakina. Damian Lillard, especially at his advanced age, even though he's in his early 30s, he can't continue to carry this franchise. Other guys that I mentioned was going to have to step up. They still within striking distance of their playing tournament. Now, on the flip side for New Orleans, that was a big win for them. Brandon Ingram, I know he's been injured off and on all year, but it's nice to hear from him again. Who's going to help out CJ McCollum? We know we got Jose Alvarado. that pass. Shout out to our guy Matt Peck from CHGO who covers the Bulls. I know you can't stand him, but Alvarado is a gamer. You still have Troy Murphy III, who's a nice player coming off their bench. So New Orleans still has some nice pieces. Hopefully they're finally starting to turn it around.
Now going back to Tuesday's games, of course, the Clippers, continuing that losing streak. They lose to the T-Wolves 108-101. Paul George did have 25 in that game, but again, same problems, same issues, and not making their shots like when they have to and when they need to. So, but a nice win for Minnesota. San Antonio snapped I believe it was a 13-game losing streak against Utah. So, I mean, not against Utah, but it was a 16-game losing streak overall. They had lost 16 in a row. And so, but then they were able to bounce back and beat the Jazz. Keldon Johnson had 25 points leading the way for the Spurs. So not a good loss if you're Utah. If you're trying to stay in that realm of that play-in seeds.
And if they happen to lose out at the end of the season, they will look back and one of those games will be that game, and it'll be the reason why they'll lose out on the play-in should it come down to that situation. Lakina, before we move on and give the schedule for this weekend's games, I want to ask you about the New York Knicks. They beat the sad Brooklyn Nets 142-118 on Wednesday. Jalen Brunson had 39 points. I was listening to some local sports radio in New York City on both stations the last couple of days, and some of their hosts are talking about the Knicks perhaps making a surprise move in the playoffs, getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. I know they're performing a little bit above expectations than the national pundits gave them credit for before the start of the season. I know they're doing a little bit better than 2 years ago when they came out of nowhere, but I think they'll win a first-round playoff series, but that's how far it goes. I don't see this Knicks team going to the Eastern Conference Finals. They still need that one big star. They just don't have it. Now, Jalen Brunson has made a big difference on this team, yes, and Julius Randle has turned his game around unlike a year ago, but I cannot, unless it's a big injury somewhere, I do not see this Knicks team making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that, and I see some people were asking that. But look, I mean, I don't think it's really gonna depend on their matchups. I mean, who they end up playing in the first round. They might
play Cleveland in the first round.
Yeah, they could lose to lose in first round depending on who they play. So I don't see them going all the way to the West. I mean to the Eastern Conference Finals. I just don't see it happening. Now, could they? Will they make the playoffs? Yes. Now it's gonna depend on where they play. So I just don't see that happening. But it is what it is there. Now let's go to the rest of the schedule for this weekend. Coming up a busy weekend in the NBA. Starting tonight, you got Orlando and Charlotte at 6:00. You got Portland and Atlanta. I believe this is going to be Quinn Snyder's first game coaching the Hawks. So interesting game. Trae Young versus Damian Lillard. Getting a new coach 2/3 through the season. That's going to be interesting to say the least. Brooklyn and Boston, and I know ESPN probably would hope that they were able to flex out of this game. That's the first game of the doubleheader of Friday night doubleheader at 6:30. You got the Knicks and the Heat. And of course, the Bulls and the Suns at 7:00 over at the United Center.
Yeah, continuing with our Friday night schedule, we mentioned the Knicks and the Heat at 7:00, the Jazz and the Thunder at OKC also at 7:00. The second half of the ESPN doubleheader tonight will feature Memphis at Denver at 9:00. Hopefully, there'll be a better game. Rounding out tonight's schedule, Friday, New Orleans at Golden State at 9:00, the Clippers and the Kings at 9:00, and that's going to be a big game for both teams, especially for the Clippers as they try to end their losing streak, and positioning is on the line as well because Sacramento is right up there at the top half of that Western Conference bracket. And the Timberwolves will play the Lakers at formerly known as Staples Center tonight at 9:30.
Yeah, they're now 10 games over 500. I'm talking about the Kings for the first time since 2005, and from April of 2005 to the 26th of February. That was just that was just a couple of days ago. That's a span of over 6,500 days. That's the second longest span in NBA history. So the nice way for the Kings. And let's see. I guess you can take the over. I guess we're going to go by from last week. So we'll see if we'll get a monster scoring tonight. You got for tomorrow's matchup Saturday. You got Toronto and Washington. They faced each other earlier this week. I'm not repeating myself. They did. Washington won that one on Monday. But weirdness, schedule weirdness, I guess. Detroit and Cleveland at 6:30, and Atlanta and Miami back to back for both teams at 7:00.
And rounding out Saturday night schedule, tomorrow we have Houston at San Antonio at 7. The Saturday night game of the day for ABC will have Philadelphia at Milwaukee. That's at 7:30 p.m. I believe no Giannis Antetokounmpo for that one, but they still should be an interesting game. And then rounding out the Saturday night schedule for tomorrow, Minnesota at Sacramento at 9:00.
And going into Sunday, this should be a fun one here. The first game of the ABC Sunday doubleheader at noon. You got Phoenix and Dallas. That should be a fun one. KD versus Luka. CP3 versus Kyrie. That should be a fun one. Could be a preview of a Western Conference playoff matchup. We'll see. Indiana, Chicago. Note the start time, folks, at 2:30. All you Bulls fans. I know it was a little bit weird last week with their couple weeks back, actually, with their game against the Warriors. A lot of people didn't know it was a 2:30 game. Now, speaking of the Warriors, they also have a 2:30 game. Second game of the ABC Sunday doubleheader. You got they will face the Lakers at 2:30. No AD, very likely. No LeBron, no Steph, but it should be a fun one nonetheless. You got a great supporting cast there for the Lakers on both teams, I should say. So that should be a fun one. Charlotte and Brooklyn at 5. You got Portland and continue their East Coast road trip at Orlando at 5.
Orlando at 5. And rounding out the Sunday night schedule, the Spurs at Houston to take on the Rockets at 6:00. Also at 6:00, Utah at OKC as the Jazz take on the Thunder. A big game for both teams as both squads trying to still fight to stay in the play-in tournament. At 6:30, the first half of the ESPN Sunday night doubleheader featuring your New York Knicks at the Boston Celtics at TD Bank North Garden. Also at 6:30, the Bucks and the Wizards. And then rounding out the Sunday night schedule, the second half of the ESPN Sunday night doubleheader, Memphis at the Clippers.
And that is your schedule for the NBA for this weekend. You listen to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. Akina McGee, Cindy Brown with you. We're going to stay in the hardwood, but we're also going to be talking about college hardwood. Going to yesterday, last night, I should say, Illinois got a big win against Michigan.
Yay!
91-87 in double overtime. Matthew Mayer had 24 points, who helped kind of lead the charge. Of course, the Michigan was up big. At the in regulation, they pulled a nice little run together. Talk about Illinois. They were throwing stuff, down there at Assembly Hall. So like, I'm not going to throw the corporate name, so forget about that. Yeah, but this was a big. That's a big loss for Michigan because they were kind of like right there on the bubble. This loss, unfortunately, doesn't help them. So we'll get to the conference implication, the playoff, the tournament implications in just a second. But a nice win for Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois came out hot last night. It was a very contested game. Coleman Hawkins had 6 points, but he was very good on the defensive end. He had 7 rebounds. Dane Danger had 8 points and 4 rebounds. He stayed out of foul trouble a little bit, Lakina. So there was some progress there. Like I said, Matthew Meyer led the team with 24 points. Terrence Shannon was very good once again. I know he didn't have a good shooting game, only 4 of 14, but he was aggressive, driving the ball to the basket, scoring 21 points. RJ Melendez had 12 points. He was the starting 2 guard, and he's been doing very well. And Mr. Rogers for Illinois had 14 points off the bench. Ty Rogers, we talked about him the last couple of shows, Lakina. He's that main glue that comes off the bench there, 6 man. He's been doing very well right now for Illinois these last few weeks. So Illinois, it seems like they learned their lesson from their loss last Sunday afternoon at Ohio State. Michigan gave him a battle last night. Dickinson, their big guy, he had a good game, but he had some not so good moments down the stretch in regulation and in overtime. But Illinois somehow find a way to survive on senior night.
Yeah, definitely an interesting game, and nonetheless, they're really a kind of a crazy game too. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately for Michigan, I think this will definitely, will have their chances of getting the tournament because they're kind of like right outside the bubble now. Going into the rest of the schedule from yesterday, of course, Houston they wrap up the American Conference championship, beating Wichita State. UCLA pulled away from Arizona State. Wisconsin is another team that is right there on the bubble. Unfortunately, they had multiple chances, but they were lost out to Purdue 63-61. Arizona held off USC by 6. And of course, again, you're seeing some of the other conference. We'll get to all that other stuff in a second. But unfortunately, on the Horizon League side, of course, Antoine Davis. Of course, if you guys are following him, the Detroit Mercy Star, was trying to get to a Pistol P scoring record that has been hold for like over 50 years. Was just 4 points short. Of course, Youngstown State actually played some defense, so they held him off. He only had 22.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, of course, it's his 5th year, so unfortunately, he is 4 points short. Of course, the Titans lose to Youngstown State 71-66, and I believe that's the second round of the Horizon League tournament. So, Pistol P, once again, his record will stay intact.
Also, too, going back to Big Ten action from last night, Minnesota upsets Rutgers 75-74. We talked about Rutgers, Lakina, being on the top half of the Big Ten bracket. They've been stumbling these last couple of weeks, along with Purdue and Illinois to a lesser extent. What do you think it does to Rutgers' chances for getting to the Big Ten to the big dance? Because I believe they need to make a big statement next week in Chicago in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, that buzzer beat by Jameson Bell. I think they looked at it for like 10 minutes, which is weird because I'm wondering whether there's some gambling going on in that game. I'm just wondering because they looked at it for like 10 minutes and he had the ball off for like 0.2 seconds left.
Didn't cover the spread.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, of course it counted. Duh. So. But yeah, I mean, that's not the kind of loss you want if you're Rutgers, especially this close to your conference tournament. It starts next week. You're right there, kind of like on that borderline of the bubble. So it shouldn't affect them too much. I mean, it might be if they don't make a nice show in the Big Ten tournament, they might be one of those last 4 in, and they may have to play Tuesday or Wednesday. So they're gonna have to figure that out in that front. So yeah, like I said, some of the other scores going back to. This weekend, as this is sort of the last week of the regular season. So Alabama came back for, I think they were like 15 against Auburn. They were able to come back and tie it overtime. They win 90-85. TCU held off Texas. That was a fun game to watch. K-State beat OU. UConn just hammered DePaul. Ooh, that was they were up. I think they were up by 28 and the 2 or something like that at one point. It was just brutal. You feel bad for Tony Somerville because he's had injuries. It's just bad luck. So I don't know if he's on the hot seat there, but Vanderbilt beat Kentucky. So just when you thought that maybe Kentucky was figuring it out, they lose to Vandy. So Jerry Stackhouse and his guys trying to make some noise.
Take that, John Calipari.
Ohio State beat Maryland by 10, so they're trying to get back on the bubble. I should say Xavier beat Providence in other league action. So let's see. Missouri held off LSU, and Penn State beat Northwestern, a tough one for Northwestern in overtime. They're kind of like stumbling down. They were the 2 seed just last week, and now they've kind of stumbled a little bit. So it's all about lasting impression, especially with this time of year. Yes, they got a nice resume. I'm talking about Northwestern, but you don't want to have a bad losing streak, going into it. The Penn State's trying to put themselves on the bubble too, so they gotta have to watch it there. I'm talking about Northwestern, so
I assume that was their last game of the year, correct? I'm talking about regular season.
Yes.
Talking about Northwestern,
yes.
yeah.
I believe so.
In my opinion, they need to win at least 2 games in the Big Ten tournament next week here in Chicago, so they can improve their resume. I believe they're in the NCAA tournament, but they need to win a couple of games just to get their confidence back and improve their seeding.
Kansas held off Texas Tech. I think this is like their 18th. They're 20. I think it's like their 21st Big 12, Big 8/Big 12 title. I think this is their 28th or something like that. But it's like their 18th, like their 15th or 16th under Bill Self. I mean, that was crazy. But Marquette, Shaka Smart. I mean, this was a Marquette team that a lot of people thought would finish near the bottom, but they were able to. They clinched number 1 seed in the Big East, so they beat Butler pretty easily. Tennessee beat Arkansas. Virginia with a nice bounce back win. Iowa loses to Iowa. I mean, I don't, that was always a little confusing to me. But Boise State upset San Diego State. Texas A&M held off Ole Miss. So Duke with their last home game of the season, I should say, they beat NC State. So like I said, this is sort of like a lot of sales for a conference tournament as we go into this weekend. You got the Missouri Valley tournament going on. Number 1 seed Bradley is up 7 right now against Northern Iowa. They're playing as we speak. But you guys can put on mute and listen to us too, so that we're not going to be offended by that. And so the conferences, kind of starting off as well. So, like I said, a lot of this is just, the bigger conferences are finishing up their season. So we got like a lot of Missouri State and Southern Illinois. That's an 8th, or I should say. That's actually going to be on NBC Sports Chicago Plus. So check your local listings here in Chicago for that one. Like I said, everyone else is sort of finishing up their season. Tonight you got New Mexico and Colorado State. I mean, like I said, New Mexico's going to have to perhaps maybe have to win the whole conference to get ready for that, to even get into the tournament. So, but finishing up on Saturday, tomorrow, you got Alabama and Texas A&M. That's at 11 a.m. on CBS. Iowa State, they've been struggling lately. Win against Baylor on the road would definitely help improve their seeding. That's at 11 a.m. on ESPN2.
And some of the key games for Sunday goes like this. Number 1, Houston will travel to Memphis to take on Penny Hardaway's Memphis Tigers. That's at 11 o'clock on CBS. I'll definitely be tuning into that one. At the same time, at 11 a.m. on Big Ten Network, number 21, Maryland will travel to Penn State to take on the Nittany Lions. At 11:30 a.m. on Sunday on Fox, we'll have Purdue hosting Illinois. We'll see if Illinois can get back on track on that one. And rolling down the rest of the Sunday schedule, Nebraska at Iowa at 1 o'clock on Big Ten Network. And as we in Michigan, we'll travel to Bloomington, Indiana to take on number 15, the Indiana Hoosiers. That's at 3:30 on CBS.
Yeah, the Missouri Valley will be cushioning their spots. I believe the Ohio Valley, where Belmont and Murray State used to play, they'll be there's going to be some tickets punched by the time we reconvene on Monday. So make sure you guys check that out. Now going back to Saturday, Ohio State and Michigan State. Ohio State trying to get back on the bubble, so we'll see if it's not too little too late for them. That's going to be 11 a.m. on ESPN. You got Tennessee and Auburn also on ESPN at 1 o'clock tomorrow. K-State and West Virginia. Of course, Duke and North Carolina. That's a big one, of course. That's going to be at Chapel Hill. TCU and Oklahoma. And Kansas and Texas at 3 o'clock on ESPN. And on the night games, you got Utah and Colorado, Pittsburgh and Miami. That should be a fun one on AC Network at 5 o'clock tomorrow. I mentioned Duke and North Carolina. Let's see. UConn, Villanova at 5:30 on the big Fox Network tomorrow. Let's see here. UCLA hosting Arizona. If Arizona beats UCLA, they get a share of the Pac-12 title. If they lose, then UCLA gets it all by themselves. And of course, that those are your schedule for the for college hoops as we're finished up the regular season, as we're going into March Madness with conference tournaments commencing.
Stay tuned for more sports and more fun as Second City Sports continues with Jack Bushman, host of Locked On Blackhawks podcast, and a whole lot more. I'm Sid Deslakina. You're listening to Sports Zone Chicago.
No, I don't know, though. I'm scared.
Do you know that you're in my lane? No, not at all. Are you not paying attention? Are you texting? I was just checking in with my mom. I was telling her that I thought we'd be home by 6. It's okay. There's enough time. Just pay attention. I'm not even halfway through my text. There's no way. I'm not even going to look up. My babies are in the car. You have to pay attention. It's just supposed to be a quick text. I'm so sorry.
Hi, I'm Tom Brady, the director of DODEA. September is National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. The simple act of reaching out and caring for those in our communities is something we all can do. Just being there for someone you care about can be a tremendous first step in getting them access to confidential resources and support that they need. It only takes one person and one small act and 1 minute to make a difference. Let's make a difference.
Many will hear the calling. Few will earn the title. United States Marine. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Second City Sports on the hashtag Friday Fun Friday edition. We're live in the living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid Deslakina. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80. Say it 5 times fast.
You follow me? That's easy. Not so easy there. You can follow me at Keita McGee on the Twitter and at Keita McGee on the IG.
We have less than an hour left of this extravaganza we call a Sports Talk Radio Show. If you want to hit us up in the comment section, especially for our next guest, you can always go to Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in your questions or comments in the comments section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you. And just a daily reminder, you can also catch Sports Zone Chicago, now available on Roku TV. Lakina, let's not waste any time. Let's do that hockey, as today is the NHL trade deadline day, and we have on a guest who's the main host of the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. You can catch that podcast wherever you get your podcast, and you can watch it on YouTube as well. Just type in Locked On Blackhawks. You can follow him on Twitter at Jack Bushman 2. That's the number 2, just Jack Bushman the number 2 on the Twitter. And you can follow his other hockey account, Talking Hockey, on Twitter as well. Let's welcome into the show, Mr. Jack Bushman. Jack, welcome, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sydney and Lakina, I got to say, I know I'm on here to talk hockey, but hearing you guys talk about college basketball while I was in the lobby has me fired up for what we're about to see these next couple of weeks with March Madness around the corner. But I'm super excited. Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. And we'll see if the Blackhawks have any moves here as we're into the last hour of the trade deadline.
Just a note before we continue this interview, if there's any breaking news as far involving any trades of note, in particular the Blackhawks, will bring that to you throughout the course of the show and definitely throughout this interview. So we want to put that disclaimer out there. Jack, I want to start out with Patrick Kane. Of course, he made his debut last night with the New York Rangers. We'll talk about that in just a second. But it looks like GM of the Hawks, Kyle Davidson, it looks like this was obviously the best deal that he got for Patrick Kane from the New York Rangers. I thought personally, when Vladimir Tarasenko was traded to the Rangers a couple of weeks ago, he's pairing up with Panarin. I said I didn't think Patrick Kane was going to go over there, but Patrick Kane insisted that he wanted to play for the Rangers. He got his wish. What are your thoughts about the deal?
Yeah, it is kind of an unfortunate situation, and I do feel for Blackhawks fans who are frustrated considering we didn't get an optimal return for Patrick Kane. But all things considered, considering that Patrick Kane only gave Kyle Davidson the New York Rangers to work with, he really had zero leverage, like no leverage whatsoever. And in fact, getting a conditional 2023 second round pick that could turn into a first if the Rangers reach the Eastern Conference Final this year, that was probably the best that he was going to do. And that's probably even more than what most folks expected in the past couple of days leading up to that deal. So I know it doesn't seem like a lot, especially considering what Patrick Kane did for Chicago, 3-time Stanley Cup champion, arguably the greatest Blackhawk in franchise history. And to get that type of return, it's not going to sit well with the fans. And I understand that. But one thing I've really been trying to resonate to them is this was the best that Kyle Davidson could do. This really was his only option. The other one was letting Patrick Kane walk away in free agency for nothing in return. And that's just bad business. You just don't do that in the world of sports. I know some people are saying, well, is this really better than getting nothing? Yes, this is absolutely, absolutely better than getting nothing. I know it's a tough pill to swallow to see such an icon for this franchise move away for that type of return, but this was the best that Kyle Davidson could have done, Sydney.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, people need to also remember too, with hockey, especially when it comes to the NHL, I mean, you're kind of in the player's hands, especially with Kaner having these no trade clauses. I mean, the only place he would go to is the Rangers because they're right there, kind of like the top contenders of the East. So unfortunately, this is the best yet. Look, I thought it was a good trade. I thought it was a solid trade for what they were able to get for him. So. But going to Max Domi for 1 second there, of course he was traded to Dallas. He and Dylan Wells. They get Anton Kudaban. Some of these European names are hard for me to pronounce. 2025 second rounder. So that trade was a solid trade for the Blackhawks. Don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. I do think taking on Anton Khudobin's $2.2 million contract, doing Dallas that favor. Maybe the Blackhawks could have gotten a little bit more, but going into this season and leading up to the trade deadline, one thing I talked about on my show was if the Blackhawks could get a second round pick for Max Domi at the end of the day, I'd be happy about it. And that's what they got. So there are, I think, a couple of deals that Kyle Davidson has made that maybe they could have been a little better, but I still think taking on assets, getting assets for a player that, we just signed in free agency, getting a second round pick, Anton Khudobin, just someone who's going to take up some cap space for the rest of this year. But the name of the game for the Blackhawks is getting future assets, getting draft picks, and they were able to do that and get a solid draft pick for Max Domi. So all in all, I think it was a good deal. And there is also the chance that Max Domi could be coming back here in the offseason. We've heard a bunch of rumors that, Domi, despite the Blackhawks not having a lot of success at all this season, he was really enjoying himself here. The coaching staff really liked having him. And he's talked about how he would kind of like some stability at this point in his career, being a guy that's bounced through several NHL teams throughout his career thus far. And with the Blackhawks having an awful lot of cap space coming up this summer, they could give Max Domi a very lucrative deal. They're going to need players that are going to take on some big type of money just to get to the salary cap floor. It's kind of crazy. We went through all those years where the Blackhawks had no financial wiggle room whatsoever, and now they have like most in the entire NHL. That's what they're use to their advantage, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a reunion with Max Domi this summer. Anything can happen, but again, he really enjoyed his time here, and the Blackhawks, I think, really enjoyed having that kind of veteran presence. I know they're going through a rebuild, but you still need to have some veterans on your roster, right? And Max Domi feels like a guy that could be a good fit there. So there is the potential, while Max Domi has just been shipped out, that we could see more of him in a Blackhawks sweater this summer potentially.
I'm getting old right now, Jack. I remember Max's father playing from 20 plus years ago. So funny how time flies. Jack Bushman, host of the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, is hanging out with us on a Friday edition of Second City Sports on Chicago. See look in here with us. We're live and in living color, talking Blackhawks in the NHL. Let's say it was the other deals that were made from the Blackhawks, Jack. Of course, Toronto gets Sam Lafferty, and they get Jake McCabe. I thought both of them may had a bright future with the Blackhawks, but Kyle Davidson said no, that was the case. I think this is going to be a good deal for Toronto as they trying to look to win now and get past the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, this feels like a deal that really could work out for both sides here. Sam Lafferty and Jake McCabe were two of the few bright spots on the Blackhawks this season. And as unfortunate as it is to trade away those types of players, it's kind of what happens in a rebuild. You need to give away good stuff in order to take on good assets in return. That's just kind of how business works. So as tough as it is to see Sam Lafferty, who ever since he came here, he was actually Kyle Davidson's first acquisition when he was the interim general manager for the Blackhawks. He really has just been everything that a playoff team would want, a guy who can be in the bottom six and provide some energy, some intensity. He's willing to throw hits, sacrifice his body. He's great on the penalty kill. Tied for the league in shorthanded goals this season. And the finishing touch really came around for him this year. That was kind of one thing we saw from him last year when he first joined the Blackhawks. He got a ton of opportunities because of his speed and what he was able to generate. Just wasn't able to find the back of the net. That kind of changed in the last month or two leading up to him getting dealt. And the Blackhawks, I thought, really capitalized on his return. And same with Jake McCabe, who I think was probably the best player for the Blackhawks when he was here throughout the first half. This is a Blackhawks team that right now has a goal differential of like -70, and Jake McCabe +7 when he was on the Blackhawks. I mean, that is an incredible stat. I know plus minus isn't the end all be all of hockey stats, but for McCabe to be +7 on this Blackhawks team really was impressive. He was having a phenomenal year, and the Blackhawks really capitalized on both Lafferty and McCabe having strong seasons. So I know some people out there were a little upset that maybe the Blackhawks didn't get a first round pick in the 2023 NHL draft, which is rumored to be the strongest first round that we've seen in quite some time. But Kyle Davidson, I think, also has done a really good job of kind of spreading out the draft picks that he's taking on. The Blackhawks now have at least 2 first-round picks in each of the next 3 NHL drafts. I'm sure they're going to be adding more to that with all the cap space that they'll have. I also think with this being a very heavy first round, I think some teams were reluctant to give away 2023 first-round picks. So that was a little frustrating that they couldn't get into the first round in 2023, but the way I kind of broke it down was you get a first for Jake McCabe, you get a second for Sam Lafferty. If you told me that even 2 weeks ago or leading into the season, I would have been absolutely thrilled about that return. So I was really happy with this move in particular from Kyle Davidson, 2 high draft picks. And for Toronto on the other end, like you mentioned, Sydney, they get 2 really solid players that I think are made for postseason hockey. And obviously Toronto's been trying to get over that hump for quite some time. I mean, they're usually the laughing stock of Twitter come April and May. So those are 2 players that I really do think can help them get over that hump and are really primed for postseason hockey.
Let's talk about the rest of the NHL, especially when it comes to the trade line first, and we'll talk about the league as a whole. Going into these last 2 weeks of the season. Now, were there like any trades that kind of you kind of like let you scratching your heads? Were there any trades that kind of surprised you? I know the Hurricanes got a big defenseman in Shane Grubauer, and I think the Canucks got Philippe Hornick. The King. I mean, like I said, the Senators got Jacob Chucherum, who Sid knows I really like him. So, and were there like any trades that kind of like let you sort of like scratching your heads? Where they're sort of like, okay, that's interesting. Were like any trades that kind of like gave you that reaction?
The one trade that really stood out to me, I'm not sure if you two saw it, but the Nashville Predators traded Tanner Jeannot to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Tampa Bay gave up an unworldly return. There were rumors going out there on Twitter that general managers literally had their jaws on the floor for that type of return. I think 4 draft picks for Tanner Jeannot, who had a really strong rookie season last year for Nashville, but he shot close to 20%. And anytime you see someone with a shooting percentage that high, you are a little worried of it coming back down to earth. We saw the offensive numbers and the shooting percentage take a dip for Tanner Jeannot this season, but Tampa Bay still wound up giving away quite a lot for him. And I know that occurred the day before the Blackhawks traded Sam Lafferty. So that had some Blackhawks fans being like, could we get a first round pick for Sam Lafferty? I don't think another general manager around the league was going to give away that type of return. But it is kind of interesting that in this post-COVID salary cap era, that's really what has been the driving factor for good returns, because there are so many contending teams around the NHL right now that just have no cap space because the salary cap isn't supposed to go up until this summer or the following summer. So a lot of teams are in a financial crunch right now, and that's why we've seen players on cheap deals generate such good returns, like a Sam Lafferty, a guy who's on a playoff team, a bottom 6 guy. He gets a second round pick for the Blackhawks because he's signed to a very team friendly deal. And we also saw that at last year's trade deadline with Brandon Hagel, as unfortunate as it was to give away a player of that caliber. And as frustrating as it's been to see him on the top line for Tampa Bay, having a ton of success with that club, the Blackhawks had offered 2 first round picks, Taylor Radish and Boris Kachuk. It was just simply a deal that general manager Kyle Davidson couldn't say no to. He said himself, we don't want to trade away Brandon Hagel, but this was something I couldn't say no to. Tampa Bay gave away a lot because they don't have any financial flexibility really. And that was kind of what we saw again with the Tanner Jeannot trade. So that was the one that really shocked me, and I'm sure shocked a ton of people across the NHL, because that's, again, probably a bottom 6 guy on a playoff roster, and Tampa Bay gave away a ton of future draft picks in exchange for him. We'll see if it pays off, because Tampa Bay certainly has the roster to still go and compete for the Stanley Cup. Obviously, they were back-to-back champions and made it to the Stanley Cup for the 3rd consecutive year last year. Those types of deals have worked out for them so far. It's going to be interesting to see if Jeannot helps them find postseason success once again this year.
Let's go back to the Western Conference, Jack, and talk about these 2 teams. The LA Kings, who were the surprise team last year, they took Edmonton to 7, and the Vegas Golden Knights, who barely missed the playoffs last year, thanks to the Blackhawks beating them at the second to last game of the regular season. This year, the Kings are still there, but they're going through some goaltending issues right now. They traded Jonathan Quick yesterday to Columbus. Jonathan Quick said, I'm not going to Columbus. And let me hold out for a better deal. He got his wish, and he's now going to the Vegas Golden Knights. What's your outlook for both those teams as we head down the stretch towards the end of the regular season?
The Western Conference is so up for grabs right now. The Eastern Conference is certainly the stronger conference, but the West is really anyone's game right now. I think a lot of people are just assuming the Colorado Avalanche are going to, they're starting to get healthy, starting to play their best hockey of the season. A lot of people are just kind of assuming that they're going to roll through the Western Conference and get back. But you just mentioned 2 teams right there who I think have the capability of hanging around with them. Vegas, I know they're dealing with injury problems, and that probably leaves me a little concerned on that front. But I still, coming into the season, I thought they were the dark horse. I know a lot of people love rooting against Vegas because of their salary cap maneuvers and everything they kind of do. Everyone kind of loves rooting against them, but I still think they are one of the better teams in the Western Conference. As for Los Angeles, I think they're a really interesting club, because I still feel like, in my mind, they're maybe a year or 2 away from being legitimate contenders, but at the same time, they got 78 points right now in the Western Conference, 1 point off conference lead. I don't think anyone expected them last year. No one really expected them to give Edmonton the run that they did, or even qualify for the Stanley Cup playoffs. I don't think anyone really expected them to be arguably the best team in the West right now. So the West is just so up for grabs. In my mind, it's kind of just whoever is playing the best hockey going into the playoffs like that. That's what you're always trying to do and what you're striving for this time of year. So I'm super excited about the Western Conference. Jonathan Quick, I know, is probably a little salty that he's not going to be along for the ride this year. I'm super stoked to watch everything in this conference and how it shakes out here in the next month, because a lot of teams are neck and neck. And outside of the Avalanche, I don't think anyone really knows who the best team is or the most likely team to represent the Western Conference in the Stanley Cup final.
Let's go to East for a second. I know that the Bruins already have over 100 points. But, I know you got Toronto, of course, we talked about him earlier. I know Tampa Bay is right there. Carolina knows how much I love that Carolina squad.
The no-name squad.
Yeah, that's basically who we are. There are a bunch of no-names, but yeah, they're like leading the Metropolitan Division right now. Also, you got New Jersey, which has a lot of the big stars. They're right there as well, along with the Rangers too. Yeah, with the Kane trade, I know they lost, but you got to think they'll probably get better as Kaner gets his feet wet there. What do you think about the East? Is it really Boston and the Fields, or do you think one of the other teams we've mentioned, get up there and challenge them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. For me, I just have a hard time going against Tampa Bay. They remind me a lot of what the Chicago Blackhawks were from 2010 to 2015, where it's kind of like, we're going to get through the regular season, whatever seed we get, we're okay with it because we know we have the guys in this locker room who have been there and done that, who know how to get the job done. And it's hard for me to pick anyone to beat Tampa Bay 4 times in 7 games. So that's kind of still where I'm leaning. But the 2 other teams that intrigue me the most, you mentioned the Bruins. They're just a point percentage of 83%, and we have 20 games left in the season. It's absolutely unheard of. Hard to say the Bruins aren't going to be able to find that same success in the playoffs. The other team would be the New York Rangers. At the end of the day, they are just so loaded. I know they lost Patrick Kane's team debut to the Ottawa Senators last night, but just look at this roster as a whole. The top 6 is incredible considering they've added Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, the team is absolutely loaded with talent. Adam Fox on the back end to man the power play. And then you got Igor Shesterkin in net, who, outside of Andrei Vasilevsky, he's probably the next guy that I'd want manning the net come playoff time. So those are really the 3 teams that I'm kind of looking at the most here as we're leading up to the playoffs. I think one of those 3 teams, in my mind at least, are most likely to come out of the Eastern Conference.
We're heading down the home stretch with the Locked On Blackhawks host Jack Bushman right here on Second City Sports, the Friday edition, right here on Sports Zone Chicago. We're live and live in color. Sid King hanging out with you. Back to the Blackhawks, Jack. Of course, you have Ian Mitchell, Taylor Radish, and Philip Kurashev. Some of the prospects left on this roster. I know Jonathan Taves, Captain Series, is not going to play the rest of this year due to various health issues. What should Blackhawks fans look forward to? What should they be paying attention to between now and the end of the regular season?
They should not be looking at the final results because there are going to be a lot of losses coming for this Blackhawks team in these final 22 games, considering Kane's gone, Domi's gone, McCabe's gone, Lafferty's gone. But those kind of the intention here at the end of the deadline. You want to be losing these games and putting yourself in a good position for the 2023 NHL draft, but that doesn't mean you should ignore these games completely because there are still some pieces that the Blackhawks are hopeful for moving forward that are going to be getting good opportunities now that those players that I just mentioned have been traded away. You mentioned Taylor Radish. He's a guy who's had a really strong season for the Blackhawks, kind of been solidified on the second line. He played with Jonathan Taves a ton when he was still healthy. So hopefully Radish will be able to kind of keep producing, particularly in the goal scoring department. I think that's his best asset. And I really do think there's a chance that he's a second line, maybe as this team gets deeper and deeper, a third line piece of the future, but a guy who's got some good size, decent speed, goes to the front of the net with a purpose and has a really strong shot. So he's someone that I'm really going to still be keeping an eye on here in the second half. Philip Kurashev, someone who he's been getting these opportunities inside the top 6, and he shows us flashes from time to time. My biggest critique on him, not only this year, but last season as well, it's time for Philip Kurashev to start doing it a little bit more consistently. To be fair, again, kind of like Radish, he's not a top line player on a good team, probably more so a second or a third liner. So probably in a little bit over his head playing top line minutes, or at least for people who are expecting him to produce as a top liner, that's probably never going to be his game necessarily. But Philip Kurashev has shown us a lot of good stuff. And I think people forget he's still quite young and was a 4th round pick not all that long ago. Not many picks in that draft have played as many NHL games as Philip Kurashev has. So I think one thing that I do want to emphasize with Blackhawks fans throughout this stretch, not only the end of this season, but next year as well, we can afford to be patient. We don't need players to go in and produce right now. And if you're not producing, we're going to trade you out, like maybe we saw with the previous regime. The name for the Blackhawks right now is being patient and figuring out what pieces to the puzzle we already have and what pieces we still need to go out and acquire. So for Blackhawks fans out there, the team is going to be bad, but be patient with these players, not only through the end of this season, but through next year. A lot of them are still very young into their NHL careers. And when you quit on players so early, it becomes frustrating when you go and see them have success somewhere else later on in their career. I think Kirby Dach is someone from Montreal who's going to only get better and better and better. And the Blackhawks just couldn't afford to be as patient with him as maybe they probably should have been. Another guy in defenseman Gustav Forsling, who we've seen do wonders for the Florida Panthers. Another guy the Blackhawks kind of quit on early. So I think that it's good that mentality's kind of been thrown out the door, and they're allowing these players to develop at the proper time, not only in the NHL level, but also down in Rockford. What they have going on with the Ice Hogs right now is very important to this front office, and that hasn't been the case really since prior to the Blackhawks winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, they hadn't developed any players from Rockford in far too long. It's been really nice to see Kyle Davidson emphasize what they have in their farm system once again, because that's a big part through your rebuilding process is giving guys opportunities down in the AHL, not throwing them right into the fire of the NHL, letting them become professionals, understand how the game's played, and further round out their games down there. So I do think the Blackhawks still have some intriguing pieces. I know they traded away a lot of their best players, some would say, but there are still pieces here that they're hopeful for. And I'm looking forward to seeing them develop over the next couple of years.
Last moment or two with Locked On Blackhawks host Jack Bushman here on Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. Lakina McGee, Cindy Brown with you. Now, Jack, last question for me. Connor McDavid, is he your Hart Trophy front runner? I think he just scored another goal, I think, a couple of nights ago. It's just the absurdity. I mean, he's leading the league in goal scoring, and I guess different shifts and whatnot. So what more can you say about Mr. Connor McDavid?
Unbelievable is the only way that I could sum it up. And I think he has to win the Hart Trophy. I don't know how he doesn't. 52 goals in 62 games. This isn't the 1980s or the 1990s. This is the modern day NHL, and he's putting up video game numbers, 118 points in 62 games. It's unfathomable, the numbers that he's producing up there in Edmonton. I'm sure he trades some of that for some team success. Obviously, Edmonton hasn't been able to get over the hump either, despite having not only him, but Leon Draisaitl, who's well considered to be one of the best players in the NHL as well. But with McDavid putting up these type of numbers this year, I think you have to. How could you not give him the Hart? He's doing things that in the modern day NHL, I don't think people thought were possible. And he's on pace for 150 points in the season. Go back 6 or 7 years ago, folks. Jamie Benn led the NHL with 88 points in a year. Connor McDavid already has 118, and he's got 20 more games to play. So he's just such an incredible talent. I went to a Blackhawks Oilers game earlier on this season, watched McDavid score a hat trick, and it's one of those moments where I told myself, I will never not buy a ticket when Connor McDavid is in town. He is worth the price of admission. Watching him perform in person, it's incredible. And man, it makes me think about what the Blackhawks could possibly have in a player like Connor Bedard, who's projected to go first overall in the 2023 NHL draft. Obviously, he's got a long ways away to be doing what McDavid is in the NHL, but that's a guy who's kind of been put into that same generational talent conversation with Connor McDavid. So seeing what he's been able to do this year up in Edmonton, it's been otherworldly. And yeah, it just has me thinking about what the Blackhawks could possibly have in their future if they get lucky enough to win the NHL draft lottery and come out with the first overall pick in the 2023 NHL draft.
Last question for me, Jack. Outside of Game 6, 2010 against Philadelphia in the Stanley Cup Final, what is your favorite Patrick Kane moment?
Putting me on the spot here. There are so many over the years. My favorite Patrick Kane moment is going to be a moment that it's not going to be a favorite moment for anybody else, but it was really what kickstarted my Blackhawks fandom as a young age, and I'll never forget it. It was during Patrick Kane's rookie year. It was in March. The Blackhawks, for the first time in 10 years probably, were on the cusp of making the playoffs. They end up falling short. But it was Patrick Kane's rookie year, Jonathan Taves' rookie year, the first time where the buzz was kind of starting to be real about what the Blackhawks could have with these two players. And I was sitting in the 100 level at the United Center with my dad and with my grandpa. Never been to a Blackhawks game in my life. Not really the biggest hockey fan, but watching 18-year-old Patrick Kane score the overtime winner against the rival St. Louis Blues, celebrating, jumping into the glass as an 18-year-old. That had me hooked on not only the Chicago Blackhawks in the game of hockey, but that had me hooked on Patrick Kane as my favorite player. And that's really what kickstarted all of this. I don't think I'd be in this position doing what I do without Patrick Kane and the legacy that he had with the Chicago Blackhawks. So yeah, that's probably my favorite Patrick Kane moment, because it was a little bit touching to me and really started my hockey fandom. But there were so many over the years, and it's been a tough pill to swallow that he's gone. It almost doesn't feel real. He was here for so long and part of my life, obviously, but I guess I'm just very fortunate, and thinking about how fortunate we all were to see Patrick Kane and all the moments that he was able to create for the Blackhawks over the years. Not sure we're ever going to see another player like him in Chicago.
Okay, real quick, my last question is my real last question. I see you're a big mac and cheese fan. What's your favorite? Homemade, box?
I'm a homemade guy. Listen, I'm making it with my own cheese, making it with the heavy creamer. I'm cooking it on the pot, and then I'm putting it in the oven and cooking it after to let it get that baked flavor, throw some breadcrumbs on there. I've really been kind of getting my own mac and cheese recipe down. And the last two, not to toot my own horn here, the last two mac and cheese batches that I've made, I guess, if you will, have been my best personally. And I've been sharing it with some other people. They've enjoyed it as well. So mac and cheese, is childish as it may sound, is a personal favorite of mine, and I think it will be forever. And now that I've kind of got the recipe down to make my own, I think cooking in the oven with breadcrumbs is the real secret there. Give it that crisp touch at the end. Yeah, that's my go-to for sure.
Yeah.
Like lobster or no lobster, or like chicken or broccoli. I've seen people put that. I've seen tomatoes too in some spots. Like, no. What about you?
That's interesting that you say that. My grandma, that's a crazy memory that you just brought in my head. My grandma used to make mac and cheese with tomatoes. I wasn't the biggest fan as a kid, but it was like, it was that dish that I'll always kind of associate with my grandma, funny enough. I wouldn't mind throwing some lobster in there. I think that's a good touch, and if it's done well, can be the correct method. Maybe I'll have to give that a try on my next one. You're throwing some great ideas my way. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm an idea person. I try.
Kinda bird dart. That should be the chant at the United Center, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But if it does, you can thank yours truly for that. This has been our guy, Jack Bushman. He's the host of the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. You can download that podcast wherever you get your podcast, and you can watch it right here on YouTube. Just type in that search engine box on your YouTube screen, Locked On Blackhawks. You can follow him on Twitter. Where can they follow you on Twitter, Mr. Bushman?
At Jack Bushman, too. You'll get Blackhawks stuff. I'm a big golf fan, UFC. I'm a big UFC fan as well. John Jones is back this weekend. So if you want a mirage of different sports stuff, check me out on Twitter at Jack Bushman, too.
And also follow him on Talking Hockey as well on Twitter. And that's where I found him a few years ago. And he really has some great stuff on there on Twitter. So follow him on Twitter at there as well. Jack, thank you so much for taking time on your busy schedule to join us today. Great job on the Blackhawks and the NHL. Much continued success, young man. And we'll definitely have you back on here soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the kind words. Looking forward to doing it again.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
Jack.
care and have a great one.
You folks as well. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, you can check out him out on check out Jack on Locked On Blackhawks, wherever you get your podcast, Google, Spotify, everywhere. So it's all right there. So we're gonna take a really quick break. We're gonna, we got some NFL Combine stuff and maybe some sports media news as well. Easy for me to say. A lot of things to wrap things up here. Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago coming up. Wrapping things up right after this.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too.
These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver.
And I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Sorry. Welcome back to our last segment of the show for this weekend for today's show right here on Sports Zone Chicago. We're live and live in color. Sid Lakina here with you. As Lakina tried to buzz off whoever's ringing her phone, I will tell you that you can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, at SidKid80, that's SIDKID80, SIDKID80.
You can follow me at Kingdom McGee on the Twitter and at Kingdom McGee on the IG. I guess someone wanted to call about a monster dunk that Bradley just showed to take the lead. They're actually in a little bit of a fight right now with Northern Iowa in the quarterfinals of the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. That's going on.
Yeah, I just saw that replay, Lakina. That was a monster dunk. Looked like the Jordan Air Jordan pose with the left hand.
Yeah, they definitely needed that because I think Northern Iowa went on a little bit of a run to tie the game. So hopefully that gives them a little bit of a spark there. But nonetheless, of course, we got you guys here for the next 25 minutes or something like that. So, we'll get right to it here. Sid, the combine is commencing right now. Wrapping it up a little bit. I think tomorrow's the last day, I believe. And unfortunately, some interesting things happened that, well, not good. I mean, Jalen Carter, the star edge rusher for Georgia, was cited in the death of a teammate and a staff member, street racing allegedly, and he had to leave for a little bit. He went back to Athens, posted bond, and then was able to go back to Indianapolis. He's not working out. He is answering questions. So I know there have been some mock drafts have the Bears perhaps taking whether it's number one or whether they decide to trade back. So this news about Jalen Carter, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that the Bears will still as they hit another three? Come on, Bradley, play a little bit of defense here. My God. But,
this is live, folks. This is live.
Yeah, I'll say live here. But yeah, what do you think about the whole Jalen Carter in that situation?
I think the Bears should be cautious, just like any other responsible NFL team. We know that NFL teams, professional sports teams in general, everybody has a different moral standard, but that's why you have a contingency plan, Lakina, just in case this case turns for the worse. For Mr. Carter, you have other players that you may consider you want to select that number one. These teams do their homework. Most teams, responsible teams, they do their homework on these prospects, and they dig in everything into your background because you are an investment. So, and Mr. Carter is no different than anybody else who's there at the combine this weekend working out for future teams. So, for the Bears right now, I'm sure behind closed doors, I'm sure that if Carter was to be their number one selection, they're sweating it out right now. But you have to have backup plans. And right now, I think he'll be off the board until whatever resolution comes within this case.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, like I said, $1,000 bail, I should say. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting though, like you said, Sid. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of caution. I know the Bears have been high on him since jump, and this whole thing, is such a tragedy. So you hope that maybe, not necessarily a resolution because, unfortunately 2 young people lost their lives, but you hope that maybe, just maybe, that they can kind of, get things, going, and we'll see what happens. Now, some of the other things, we'll do locally for a second. Devin Witherspoon, who is a corner for Illinois, I think he hurt himself. I think, sprinting, I believe. And unfortunately, he won't be able to, he did, there is a lot of prospects on him, and there's a lot of buzz about him. Of course, he did actually get a little bit banged up there, but what do you think about his chances? Perhaps he could be maybe a second rounder, or maybe a high first, although first rounder, I should say.
Yeah, like you said, injuries shouldn't be too much of a concern, but unfortunately for some of these teams there are. But it depends on how fast that he can recover from this and show what he could do in other workouts. But my opinion is he'll probably be high second round. I know that's definitely a big difference money-wise when you get selected, but probably still, like you mentioned, a high second round, maybe low first round, but probably second round in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. I mean, and like I said, there's been a lot of buzz. One of the top defenders from last year, one of the reasons why Illinois was able to have the win, kind of came out of nowhere. Raps were able to get to one of the New Year's Day bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Will Levis, of course, he kind of unleashed a little bit of a cannon, so he's going to be working out in a little bit, arm wise. Also, Bryce Young, there's been some people hesitant because about his size and whatnot. He's a little bit smaller. He's about 6 feet, so and that whole thing. But yeah, I mean, look, Drew Brees is probably the best example. I think kind of like the same size as that. So some people are wondering, I know Houston and Indianapolis. Some people say that maybe one of those teams might trade to the Bears to get to draft him. So what do you think about Bryce Young? Perhaps maybe his prospects.
I know you watched him longer than I have, Lakina. Watching him, I think he could be a good quarterback in the NFL, but I know height shouldn't be so much of a concern. But me and Lakina, for me, like I said, this is just for me watching him a couple of games here and there the last couple of years all the way through. He just doesn't have that it factor to me. I know he has enough skill to play in the NFL, but I don't know that he's an it factor for me. So his height shouldn't be a hindrance, but unfortunately with some teams it is. It's not so much seeing over the line, but how far can you throw the ball downfield? And for me, you know what I'm saying, just for me personally watching way less games than you and other scouts, he doesn't have that zip on the football to throw deep, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's gonna be another thing too. But yeah, speaking of another player that's getting some buzz, his teammate Will Anderson, and of course he's the defensive end from Alabama. Now I'm seeing some Bears fans say that maybe they should probably have concentrate on him with Carter's issues. So what do you think about Anderson? I really like his size and sort of like you
Me
see
too.
that up front. Could he? I'm sure he's whoever drafts him. I think he'll definitely have an impact right away. I really he seems like very like soft spoken. You think with his big size he would be this sort of like tough guy, but he's actually is a very soft spoken young man. So Will Anderson is probably another name that I think probably maybe Bears fans should look to, and maybe another defensive guy because they really need it. But any team that that drafts him, he'll definitely have an immediate impact.
I don't know if the Bears like him enough to select him at number one, but if they do, I won't be surprised. I kind of like them on the low, no pun intended. So, like you said, the Bears need pass rushers. In the way that you win in the NFL today but especially today's NFL, you need speed rushers, especially up front, that need to be mobile, like a Warren Sapp type when he changed the game in the mid to late 90s there. Remember, those defensive tackles were just big guys that clogged up the middle. You need some movement now, and the way that these quarterbacks are today with like Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, those guys that you get out and bootleg and scramble, you need not just defensive ends, but defensive tackles that can be mobile as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be another thing too. Now, speaking of, kind of came up with the thing here, another Georgia edge rusher, Nolan Smith. I mean, some people are saying, maybe Hassan Reddick. People say that he has a similar size and he ran similar numbers when Reddick, did the combine a few years ago. He's, his reach was about, I guess, a little bit, more than Reddick. So people are saying that maybe his arm strength and such. So there's a lot of buzz about him, kind of like growing in the last couple of days, especially.
Yeah, I don't know what round that he's projected to be selected in, but if I'm the Bears, I know you have all these picks, Brian Pauls, but if he's up there in the second round, third round, maybe if he's still on the board, I would take a look at him.
Former Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson, who decided to go the rest of his schooling, goes to the NFL. Yeah, I know the Raiders have been high on him. I mean, I feel like he's one of those guys that he just needs the right system, I guess. But because he had his struggles and what in college, but I'm wondering could he kind of be sort of like that? Is he going to be like that person that could have an impact on a franchise right away? Do we have to sit him maybe for a little bit? But it's he's definitely another name that probably could be interesting as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft.
Yeah, this is teams that could use his services, and we'll see what system that can fit him, and we'll just see what happens as the days and weeks go by. The only thing that I don't like about the combine, and this applies to the workouts as well. Again, I don't want to go off topic a little bit, but it's just to stay within the realm. Many of these scouts from these teams judge the players by what they do on a one workout day.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair. I know life's not fair. I get it, but you should take that into consideration. But you have to look at the totality of everything, what they did on the field and what they did on film. It's just everything's not just based on this one workout.
Yeah, you can have one bad workout and then suddenly your draft stock should sink. I mean, look, your games. Every game is on television now to some extent, whether it's in cable or streaming, and it's definitely kind of like one of those things where you don't want to kind of be that that guy that's why you can tell why some guys decide not to do the combine because of that reason. So yeah, I mean, I don't like the combine. I think it's just kind of like a silly thing, and they have the NFL Network fill time for like 3 days and such. So. I've never been a fan of it. I've never watched it like that. I've never have. I mean, you'll get to see Rich Eisen try to do the combine and such, but it's definitely kind of one of those things where you're sort of like, okay, let's just get it over with. So I'm not gonna, have to predict someone's future just by 4 days of strength and agility and running and sprinting and such and throwing
and jewelry jingling.
Yeah, exactly, with all their chains hanging. So I'm not into that. So it is what it is. But yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm like you. I'm not a fan of it either. I mean, maybe the NBA draft. The NBA draft combine has been a thing like the last 3 or 4 years. In some cases, it actually has helped guys sort of say, "Hey, I'm not ready for college." In their case, I think I could probably see that might be that might actually help with their stock and maybe them going back. But it just with the NFL, I think I don't want to say it's a waste, but I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, this is Second City Sports on Sportsville Chicago. Lakina McGee, Cindy Brown with you. Let's stick with the NFL. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson for a second, and then I guess apparently we heard what John Harbaugh, the Raiders head coach, said that they want to keep Lamar in the fold. Of course they do, and with the numbers, they're trying to look at numbers. Could he perhaps maybe be franchise tag? I mean, who knows? Now apparently someone started a rumor that he might go to Washington. Oh, people, my head hurts. This is
would he fit there? Yes, but Washington's gonna have to give up a lot. I know they released Carson Wentz, thank goodness, but they're gonna have to give up a lot. What do they have?
Nothing. They don't have nothing.
That's my point.
Yeah, they don't have nothing. Oh, come on, guys, block the guy. Oh no, I'm sorry, but sorry about that, folks. Yeah, Bradley is now up 56-54 over losing 56-54 to Northern Iowa. Yeah, Lamar Jackson. I mean, this whole thing. Look, I wish that something would happen because, say Washington's way over the cap. The plus they have nothing to give more. So whoever started this rumor, I think it's just
okay. Yeah, finishing up on the Lamar Jackson situation as Lakina get her audio situation intact. Lamar Jackson is one of those quarterbacks that have changed the game in the National Football League, and with his dynamic skill and talent, he's bound to make any team better. As we just mentioned, the Washington Commanders, they released Carson Wentz, but what do they really have to give up? Not much if they want to acquire his services. I know there was some other rumors that perhaps the New York Jets are in play for Lamar Jackson. I don't know if that's going to happen. I know they've been having meetings with Derek Carr, the free agent quarterback from the Las Vegas Raiders, over the last week and a half or so. So we'll see what happens with that. But Lamar Jackson is a dynamic talent. I think the issue here is going to come down to how much guaranteed money is Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, is willing to give out. And when Lamar Jackson, if he gets his long-term deal, I'm sure he wants to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. If that happens, what some of the other quarterbacks are behind Lamar Jackson, like Justin Fields in Chicago. We said before, if you Justin Fields in this campaign, attention to the situation, because whatever Lamar gets, you're going to get even more if your production goes up the next couple of years as the Bills try to continue to rebuild here.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about it's starting to rain here in our region, so yeah, I think it's kind of iffy around with the Wi-Fi. But I mean, look, I'm hoping that the Ravens can figure it out. I mean, I don't know. Lamar's been pretty quiet about this stuff, but I'm kind of at that point where I'm kind of I'm just looking for something to happen. I don't know. I'm not at the point where I'm annoyed at the Aaron Rodgers stuff. I mean, we don't have to talk about the Aaron. He's out of his darkness retreat, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean, hearing the guys that get up talk about it for the last 2 weeks and such. I mean, wake me when something happens on both fronts. I mean, I'm kind of happy. Lamar Jackson. I'm kind of where, who? It's kind of absurd. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Raiders.
Okay. No. Yeah. You are having audio issues again as you was wrapping up your point.
Yeah, I don't know. Yep. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was going to wrap up my Jackson point by saying this. There's hopefully a long-term deal can get done because the Ravens do need him. and I know that he makes their franchise that much better in terms of competing for the Super Bowl. We saw in the playoffs the last couple of years that without his services, they're just an average football team, and so that they need to resign him. Hopefully, they come to some resolutions sometime here soon. Now, before we move on, Lakina, I know we have a few minutes left. I want to talk about the Los Angeles Rams. I know many people think they can perhaps jump back into the playoffs next year, but you still have Matthew Stafford under contract. In my opinion, I'm not rooting for this, but one more big hit in his career is over. Aaron Donald has had his injury issues so far this season, missing the last almost full month of the regular season. I know you still have Cooper Kupp. Allen Robinson did not have a good year last year. The free agent signing from Chicago. Now they're talking about trading Jalen Ramsey, and rightfully so, because not too many people not talk about this until now. But the Los Angeles Rams are in salary cap hell. I know that GM said bleep these picks, and he was right a couple years ago when they won the Super Bowl over the Cincinnati Bengals. But instance to say so. You see what happens when you don't manage your salary cap right. You're in salary cap hell for the next couple years, and that's what they're facing right now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I saw those rumors about Jalen Ramsey about it. I mean, why you're seeing a lot of stuff. Maybe not back to Super Bowl, but they at least gone to the playoffs. This talk will not be happening since they came near last place in their division. I think this is where all this talk is coming from. So I don't know if this is just maybe just guys putting out there to see if they can get something, but I don't think it's gonna happen. And NFL Network, he just posted a minute ago that the Raiders are planning to franchise tag Josh Jacobs if they don't reach a deal by Tuesday's deadline. Not a big surprise. I mean, like you said, and I know Jacobs, he was kind of like a utility guy last year for them. He wants his paper, but if you're the Raiders, you really want to have that money out there for a running back. He's only 27, which he's still young-ish, but you don't want to pay all that money to a running back. So what do you think about this news with Jacobs perhaps getting the franchise tag?
Well, it's interesting for Oakland because he's the only dynamic piece on that offense next to wide receiver Devontae Adams. And so there's something there. They need a quarterback, and I know some people say that Aaron Rodgers should play for them. That's not going to happen. I know some others say Jimmy G and Jimmy Garoppolo should sign with them. Maybe that does happen. I'm not sure, but the Raiders need something on that offense. The only playmaker they have is wide receiver Devontae Adams.
Yeah, so they're going to need something. So we'll see if they can figure that out with the numbers and such. So I'm sure they're going to want to, perhaps maybe tag them. I know there was some, maybe some, there were also some rumors that maybe they, the Browns might trade Nick Chubb and perhaps maybe start a rebuild, somewhere. But, if you're now Nick Chubb, would that be something that a team would probably want? I mean, he's still young enough. He's still youngish, but at the same time, though, do you really have, if they do decide to trade Nick Chubb, not say that they are, but it might be a little bit, you may not get that haul that you're hoping for.
Exactly. As we talked about before, Lakina, with running backs, they're not as valuable as they once were. And the way the NFL offenses are ran today, you just need running backs to run out the clock. And excuse me, it's not the ground and pound game like it was when we were growing up in the 80s and early 90s. So if Cleveland wants to trade them, good, but I don't think they're going to get as much value as they think. You know as well as I do, Lakina, that when you turn the age of 30 in the NFL, that's senior citizens age, and so you're not going to get as much back as you think. Not in today's NFL anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of I'm a little sort of kind of question that whole thing. But yeah, anything else NFL wise before we move on that caught your attention this week?
I'm good as far as the NFL is concerned. And like you said, I'm waiting for that combine to end. And I know we have all these weeks to talk about it and leading up to the NFL draft. Who the Bears going to select? Will they trade this? Will they trade that? I know the new league year starts in about 10 days or so, free agency first. So we're definitely going to talk about that. So I can't wait for that and see what the Bears do along with everybody else.
Should be interesting. So we'll see what happens. You listen to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago with Keenan McGee, Cindy Brown with you as we wrap things up here. Now, what's interesting is that we talked about the RSNs. We talked a little bit about with our girl Christine Manica on last week. For me, with this whole thing with the Now apparently, I guess ESPN said that they'll probably do a digital sort of thing with some of the RSNs to kind of like make sure to get some of the teams to kind of sell teams on it. So like, what do you think about that news about perhaps maybe that happening? And
I heard something about that, but I didn't know too much detail about that. But I know ESPN has ESPN Plus with all the original programming. I know they have the hockey package on there too.
Mm-hmm.
You can get that. I know they have some of their own produced live games like college basketball with the smaller tournaments going on right now, and some of the big ones starting next week. And I know they had an NFL game on last year. It was Denver and Jacksonville from overseas, so they had that service. But anything to make money, that's what they're on right now.
Especially with the whole, I know we haven't talked about much of the whole thing about Diamond Broadway, going into bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you got some teams they're not gonna have a home, especially locally stream their and televise their games. So if ESPN can come in and say, hey, look, for a fee, we'll play a competitor's fee, to stream your games and for you get your customers and your fans to watch them live. Now it's going to depend on, is it going to be like an add-on? Is it going to be free? I doubt it's going to be free. So thankfully, at least for right now, Chicago doesn't have that issue with their local teams and such. So I think the price is going to go up, especially if this does kind of come to fruition.
Yeah, I want to end the broadcast with this. And speaking of the streaming service, MSG Networks is based out of New York City, and they announced that they're going to have a $30 a month price for MSG Plus, and with a $10 per game option. So you're going to pay $30 a month for MSG Plus, and or $310 for a yearly subscription. It's going to start in the summer. Of course, this is based out of New York City. Of course, MSG is home to the New York Giants, pre and post game, the New York Knicks, the hockey teams, the New York Rangers, the Devils, New Jersey Devils, and the New York Islanders, and the Buffalo Sabres. I think I got all the teams. So
I think
would you like, if you were in New York, it's not available across the country, just in folks in the New York Tri-City area. That's New York, New Jersey, I think part of Connecticut as well. If you were in New York City, Lakina, if you were cutting the cord, because a lot of people have been cutting the cord for years now, would you be, if you just had a stable internet connection, would you be interested in like an a la carte type of purchase like this? Because it sounds good for right now. I think that's where the future's headed anyway.
Well, yeah, I think the whole a la carte thing, I think that's going to be sort of like, that's kind of like the way of the future. But at the same time, though, we're seeing, prices going up. We're seeing some content, being switched around. So, I mean, I can kind of see why some people will want this a la carte, especially with a smaller price. But with inflation, with everything else, all the other uncertainty, I mean, if you're a fan of one of those New York teams, I mean, we'll talk about Buffalo because it just made a pretty big trade. I mean, do you want to have that kind of situation? As Bradley just hit a big three there. Sorry, folks, I'm multitasking here. They're up 5 against Northern Iowa. It was about 2.5 minutes left in the second. But yeah, I mean, I think this would be a nice sort of thing. It'd be a nice little change for everything else that's going on here. Mom, answer the phone, Mom. Answer the phone, Mom. She knows I'm busy. But yeah, I mean, look, I think this would be a nice, change. I think, especially if there's nowhere else to kind of go. And I think we've been saying it for years. People need options. So I think if this is like a thing where this is good for the cord cutters, because a lot of people, they're not, they don't have the satellite and the cable services anymore. So this will be a nice little option for those folks who have cut the cord, who go on maybe like Hulu live TV, and probably still can't watch their local teams and such. Same thing with YouTube TV. So
yeah, they don't have some of those regional, national sports channels or those regional sports channels either. So
exactly.
So I think this is a good thing.
Absolutely. So this will be a nice little showing. If there are going to be those folks that are going to want to they're going to pay $30. I think $30 isn't too bad. I mean, look, you're getting there's about like a half dozen teams, about 6 or 8 teams, in this thing. So yeah, it kind of works for them. And plus, a lot of these places, it'll be interesting to see if some of these other ones are going to be affected by the Bally Sports, buyout or bankruptcy, if you will. Some might go this route, especially if the thing with ESPN kind of falls through and with other avenues and such. This could be the thing for some of us kind of recoup some of their losses.
Yeah, so we talked about before, Lakina, with the Bally Sports, Diamond Sports situation. I know they're supposed to be heading to the bankruptcy court in a couple of weeks, so we'll keep you abreast on that story. But let's just say, for example, if these baseball teams, they cannot meet their budget from wherever this decision is from Bally Sports in the bankruptcy case, they got to make their money up somewhere. And baseball is talking about taking over the local broadcast. If that's the case, it'll be produced by Major League Baseball, but you're not going to have your local announcers outside your local radio broadcast. Wherever the baseball will hire, they will hire. Would you like that? Because it'll sound like a national broadcast. Let's just say if you're here in Chicago, the White Sox are taking on the Cleveland Guardians. And instead of Jason Benetti and Steve Stove, you'll have some out-of-towners during your game. You can watch your game, but you're not going to have your hometown announcers. The only place you can go for your hometown announcers is your local radio station.
Yeah, and that's not. I mean, look, that'd be good for Len Casper and Darren Jackson if that ever comes to fruition. And and also too on the Cubs side, of course, Pat Hughes. I mean, you can never go wrong with that, with him and Ron Cooper. You can never go wrong with those two. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that that's not going to be the case. I mean, the one thing about local broadcasts, like you want that homerism and such. I mean, sometimes you do want the national stuff. Yeah, sometimes when the Bulls are on, yeah. I mean, I love Adam and Stacey, Adam and Stacey King, but I do want to hear the national perspective. They some of them annoy me too sometimes, but but yeah, you want to get a national perspective. So if you're gonna get that through like a daily, or a nightly thing, I mean that's not something that you're not gonna want. That fans are not gonna want that. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I can't see the other leagues doing that. I know MLB is thinking about it or has talked about doing that. I can't see the other networks doing it. Other networks, league networks doing it because I think that's separating that homer calls and such. So
yeah, I know the NBA has not commented on that Bally Sports situation because I think it's 15 and 16 teams.
Yep.
NBA teams are on the Bally Sports regional networks. I know they haven't made comment about that publicly, but we'll see what happens moving forward. Now, you say you had a little breaking news before we close up shop.
Yeah,
from the
of course.
NHL.
Yeah, the NHL, of course. Yeah, the NHL, of course. They're still getting those facts, trades, Fast and Furious. The Sabres made a trade. If I can just find it for a second, Rasmus Asplund. He's going from Buffalo to Nashville, so that's a big trade for both teams in that front. So they're also too they've Sabres have acquired Jordan Greenway from the Wild in exchange for a second round pick for this year's draft and a 5th round pick for next year's draft. So things are starting to kind of get fast and furious there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, Buffalo's trying to improve themselves. I think it's been 13 years since they last made the playoffs. I think it was the last time they made it. The Blackhawks won their first Stanley Cup. So It's been a little over a decade now. So we'll see what happens with Buffalo. Surprisingly, they're doing well this year.
Yeah, I think Greenway is definitely a guy that kind of can help them in that front end because that's been their struggle. So I think Greenway is a good defenseman to kind of help with that. So that's about it, Sid. So with that said, you follow me at Keenan McGee on the Twitter and at Keenan McGee on the IG.
You can follow yours truly, Sydney Bryant, on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, at SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. SIDKID80. Make sure you download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Make sure you follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast at War on Anchor. We are available on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. And while you're at it, give War Media a follow on all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at WARR Media. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
We'd like to thank Jack Bushman, the host of the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Make sure you download that podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch it right here on YouTube. Just type in that search engine box, Locked On Blackhawks. And make sure you catch Second City Sports every Monday, every Friday from noon to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Live in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. One more again, as you young folks would say. Catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from noon to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Exclusively right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
All right, of course, you can catch Sports on Chicago anytime, anywhere on Roku TV. Of course, if you got your Roku TV or Roku TV app or the Roku TV stick, just type in Sports on Chicago on where you get your apps right there. Where you watch our show, Sean and Maya. What's up, cuz? A Smoke Fuzz. I know they're gonna have a lot of college who suck. I'm sure coming up tomorrow. So for anytime, anywhere you want, it's all right there for you. And with that said, enjoy the basketball, everybody, both NBA and college, because get to know some of those college teams. We're gonna be seeing some of them in the big dance coming up in a few weeks. So all the other stuff as well, golf and soccer, too. So check those out this weekend. For Sid, I'm Lakeena. This is Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago. Stay dry, stay safe, and we'll see you Monday.
Love, peace, and hair grease. Holla!